She said maybe we should break up, in front of her friends, like it was a joke, like it was a game she expected me to play along with. We were standing in Lisa and Mark's kitchen, music low, wine glasses half full. Her friend Jessica leaned against the counter, watching me the way people watch a dog they're not sure is trained. Emily didn't look nervous. She looked curious. I looked at her, really looked at her. She expected me to argue, to ask what she meant, to remind her of the house, the plans, the trips we had booked for the fall. Instead, I nodded once. I told her that if she wanted a breakup, we could make it real. Jessica's smile faded first. I set my glass down, picked up my jacket, and walked out without raising my voice. She did not follow. It began in someone else's kitchen, in that particular kind of social setting where people feel safe saying things they would never say alone. The narrator and his wife Emily were at their friends Lisa and Mark's house, wine glasses half full, music low, the evening easy and unhurried. Jessica, one of Emily's close friends, had been holding court for most of the night, building a quiet case against a certain type of husband, the comfortable one, the settled one, the man so at ease in his marriage that he had long since stopped proving himself. She had said, with the confidence of someone who believes they are simply stating facts, that Emily's husband would not last a week on his own. She said he was too dependent, too used to the warmth of a life someone else had helped build. And Emily, standing in that warm kitchen surrounded by people who were watching to see what she would do, did not push back. Instead, she laughed, light and curious, and said that maybe they should test that, maybe they should take a break. She said the words easily, almost playfully, but she did not blink when she said them. The room went quiet in the way rooms go quiet when something has been staged, when the people around you already know the script and are simply waiting for your line. They expected panic. They expected the husband to argue, to remind her of the house and the plans and the flights already booked for the fall, to prove right there in front of everyone that he could not afford to lose her. What they got instead was a pause, brief, deliberate, and then a single nod. He told her that if she wanted a breakup, they could make it real. Jessica's smile disappeared before Emily's did. Emily's own smile lingered a moment longer, still convinced perhaps that he was playing along, that this was his version of the game. It was not. He set his glass down on the counter, picked up his jacket from the back of the chair, and walked out of Mark's house without raising his voice, without looking over his shoulder, without giving the room the reaction it had assembled itself to receive. He heard Emily say his name once as he stepped out. She did not follow. The walk to his car was quiet, the night air ordinary, the street unchanged. But something had already shifted. Not outside, not in the world, but in the space between what had been assumed and what had just been demonstrated. The assumption was that he needed her more than she needed him. The assumption was that comfort had made him soft, that loyalty had made him predictable, and that predictability was the same as powerlessness. He did not argue with that assumption, he simply disproved it with a single, unhurried action. By the time he arrived home, Emily's texts had already started. First, she called him dramatic. Then she said Jessica had put the idea in her head. Then she asked why he had left without saying more. He did not answer any of it. The house felt different that night. Not empty, just rearranged. He moved to the guest room without announcement, and the silence that followed was not the silence of someone waiting to be forgiven. It was the silence of someone who had already made a decision. He slept in the guest room without ceremony, without explanation, and without the kind of dramatic announcement that would have given Emily something to react to. When morning came, she was already standing in the doorway of the guest room, holding her phone, not to call anyone, just holding it the way people hold things when they need something solid in their hands. She told him that Jessica thought he was trying to scare her. She said Mark had told her he would cool off by lunch. He nodded once, got dressed, and left for work without eating breakfast and without offering her the conversation she had positioned herself to receive. The morning passed ordinarily. His desk, his coffee, his usual inbox, none of it knew what had happened the night before, and there was something clarifying about that, about a world that simply continued.
Then, just before noon, his phone buzzed with a message from Ryan, a friend from college who worked in commercial real estate and occasionally crossed professional paths with Emily's firm. Ryan kept the message casual, almost apologetic in its tone. He said he had seen Emily the week before at a downtown bar, not alone. He said maybe it was nothing. He said maybe the narrator already knew. There was no drama in how Ryan wrote it, no urgency, just the careful delivery of someone who has decided that not saying something would be worse. He thanked Ryan, told him he appreciated the heads up, and set his phone down on his desk. He did not call Emily. He did not text back a question. He just sat with what he had just learned and let it settle into place like a piece of furniture moved to where it had always belonged. That evening, Emily cooked dinner. She was calm, in the focused, deliberate way that people are calm when they are managing something beneath the surface. She talked about a client meeting, she mentioned something about the weekend. She did not bring up the night before, did not reference the walkout, did not ask him to explain himself, and she did not mention any man. The meal was ordinary, the conversation was surface level, and then her phone lit up on the kitchen counter while she was mid-sentence, and a name appeared on the screen that he had never heard her mention. Jason. She turned the phone face down without pausing her sentence, without a flicker of hesitation, just a smooth, practiced motion. He did not ask who Jason was. He did not reach for the phone. He did not change the temperature of the room. He kept eating, kept nodding at the right moments, kept playing his role in the quiet performance of a dinner that pretended to be normal. But something had shifted again, and this time it was not a party trick or a test suggested by a friend in someone else's kitchen. This time, the shift had weight to it, the particular heavy weight of something real. He had walked out the night before because she had underestimated him. Now he was sitting still because he was beginning to understand the full shape of what he was dealing with, and stillness, he had always known, was not the same as ignorance. He was watching, he was waiting, and he had not yet shown his hand.
She had never been careless with her devices. That was the first thing he noticed when he came downstairs the next morning and found her laptop open on the dining table, the screen still lit, her coffee mug steaming beside it. Emily was in the shower. The sound of water running filled the upper floor of the house. He stood in the kitchen for a moment, not moving toward it, not moving away, just noticing it, the way you notice a door left open that is usually closed. Then he sat down. He did not shake. He was not angry in the way anger announces itself, hot and immediate. He simply opened the screen a little wider and looked. Jason's name filled the sidebar of her messages like it had always lived there. The conversation was not subtle. It was not professional. It was not the kind of exchange that could be explained by context or taken out of it. Jason had sent a photograph from a hotel lounge downtown, a wide shot of leather chairs and low lighting, the kind of place that markets itself as discreet. She had replied with a time. He had written that he missed the way she looked at him across a table. She had told him she felt alive again. That phrase sat differently than the rest, not because it was the most explicit thing in the thread, but because it was the most honest. She felt alive again, which meant that somewhere before this, she had stopped feeling alive. Somewhere in the ordinary rhythm of their marriage, the dinners, the plans, the fall chips, the mortgage, and the routine, she had decided she was disappearing. And rather than say that, rather than bring it to the man she had married, she had taken it somewhere else entirely. He kept reading. There were weeks of it, lunches that ran past 2 in the afternoon, client dinners that did not end until after midnight, small jokes embedded in the thread about how easy it was to deceive someone who trusted completely. His name appeared occasionally in the messages, not often, and never warmly. When Jason used it, it was as punctuation. When Emily used it, it was followed by the word predictable. That word again, the same word Jessica had circled the night at Mark's house. He was too predictable, too settled, too easy to manage. He closed the laptop gently, with the same care he would use closing a book he intended to finish later, and set the screen back to the angle it had been before he touched it. The shower was still running. He stood up, walked to the kitchen, and poured himself a glass of water. When Emily came downstairs, hair damp, in the ordinary clothes of an ordinary morning, she did not ask if he had been at the table. She did not look at the laptop. She poured her coffee and asked what his day looked like. He told her it was busy. She nodded. They moved around the kitchen the way they always had,
two people in a familiar choreography, except that now he knew the entire shape of the thing, and she did not know that he knew. And that distance between them, invisible, enormous, had just become the most important room in the house.
There is a particular kind of clarity that arrives not in the middle of a crisis, but in the hour after you have confirmed what you already suspected. It does not feel like relief. It does not feel like rage. It feels, more than anything, like a map being handed to you in a room you have been moving through blindly. He had the map now. The question was what to do with it, and the answer he kept arriving at was not confrontation, not explosion, not the kind of scene that would give Emily and her friends something to point to later as proof that he had been unstable. The answer was motion. Quiet, deliberate, irreversible motion. That morning, while Emily was getting ready for work upstairs, he called the bank. He redirected his direct deposit into a new personal account under his name alone. He did not freeze any joint accounts. He did not move her money. He simply separated the flow of his own income from the shared system, the way you would close a door between two rooms without locking anyone inside. By lunch, he had sent a message to Ryan asking for the name of the attorney Ryan had once mentioned, a family law specialist with a reputation for being thorough and unsentimental. He made an appointment for later in the week, not to file anything yet, not to begin anything publicly, just to sit across from someone who knew the terrain and understand what his options looked like from the outside. He wanted to know the map before he started walking. That evening, he packed a small suitcase. He did not hide it in the back of the closet. He placed it by the closet door in the bedroom, upright, visible, the zipper closed. Emily noticed it the moment she walked in. She stood in the doorway and looked at it, and then looked at him. And for the first time since the kitchen at Mark's house, she was not performing anything. She asked what he was doing. He said he was preparing. She told him Jessica thought he was overreacting. She said no one ends a marriage over one comment and a few messages. She said adults talk. He agreed that adults do talk, and then they act. She tried to laugh, but it came out thinner than she intended. Her phone buzzed. Jason's name appeared before she could turn the screen. She stepped into the hallway to answer it, lowering her voice. He heard his name once through the wall, and then the word complicated. When she came back into the room, she said she needed space to think. He told her that was fine. He said he would give her all the space she needed, and that he meant it in a way she had not yet understood. That night, he waited until she had fallen asleep. Then he carried his suitcase downstairs, put on his coat, and left the house. He did not slam the door. He did not turn on a light. He did not leave a note on the kitchen table explaining himself, because he had already explained himself once, in someone else's kitchen, with a nod and a set-down glass, and she had not taken him seriously then. He was not going to beg to be believed now. He got into his car, backed out of the driveway, and drove toward the lights of the city without looking back at the house. The motel was nothing remarkable, a chain property off the interstate with a parking lot that stayed half-lit through the night and a vending machine that hummed in the corridor. He had not chosen it for comfort. He had chosen it because it was neutral, because no one there knew his name or his situation, because the walls were thin enough to hear other people's televisions, but thick enough that nothing from his life could reach him unless he allowed it. He set his phone on the nightstand and watched it. By the next morning, it was vibrating in a rhythm that had become almost constant. Emily had called more times than he could count through the night. Her messages had moved through stages the way messages do when the person sending them is losing control of the narrative they built. First she wrote that he was being dramatic. Then she wrote that he was proving her friends right. Then she shifted to confusion, asking what he actually wanted from this, asking if he had thought about what he was doing. Then she wrote that she was worried, which was the message that arrived after she had realized that none of the others had worked. He read all of them. He did not respond to any of them. Around noon, Ryan called again. This time his voice carried something more specific. He said Jason had been talking openly at his office, telling people Emily was almost free, describing the situation like a transaction in progress, a clean exit from one arrangement and a smooth entry into another. Ryan had more. He said Jason had been pushing a deal through his firm that did not hold up under examination, numbers that had been arranged to suggest something they did not actually represent, investors who had been given a picture that was more optimistic than the underlying reality. Ryan said he did not know all the details. He said he thought the narrator might find it useful to know. After he hung up, the narrator sat on the edge of the motel bed for a long time. He was not thinking about revenge. He was thinking about levers, about the architecture of a situation, about the difference between reacting to something and simply redirecting it. That afternoon, he opened his laptop and spent 2 hours reviewing publicly available filings and documents connected to Jason's company. He found what he was looking for without difficulty. That evening, he drafted an anonymous submission to the compliance department of Jason's firm. No accusations, no personal information, just documents, already public, arranged in a sequence that pointed toward questions any reasonable reviewer would feel obligated to ask. He did not sign it. He did not track it after he sent it. He simply moved on. That night, Emily sent a single message that was different from all the others. She did not accuse him of anything. She did not tell him what Jessica thought. She just asked where he was. 4 words, stripped of performance. He read it and set the phone down. He was not ready to tell her where he was. He was not ready to give her the coordinates she needed to reconstruct the story she had been telling herself. The silence was still doing something. He was not going to interrupt it yet.
He did not stay hidden for long in any dramatic sense. He was still present in the city, still moving through the same streets, still drinking coffee and answering work emails and existing in the ordinary fabric of daily life. What he had stepped away from was not the world, it was the role. He had stopped being the husband who waited at home, who kept the driveway filled, who was available in the background of Emily's decisions. He had removed himself from the frame, and the effect of that absence was becoming visible in ways he had not entirely anticipated. Ryan met him for coffee near Emily's office building one afternoon, close enough to her daily geography that the proximity felt intentional without being confrontational. Ryan told him that Jason's deal had been frozen. The compliance review had escalated. Senior partners at Jason's firm were involved. Investors were asking for documentation that had not been easy to produce. Jason had stopped the quiet bragging. The version of himself he had been constructing in other people's conversations, the one who had things figured out, who moved fast and stepped into married spaces and called it opportunity, that version had grown very quiet. That afternoon, Megan called. She was Emily's sister, measured and loyal in the way that younger siblings sometimes are when they have spent years watching the older one navigate the world with too much confidence. She said Emily had shown up at their parents' house. She said Emily was crying. She said Emily kept repeating that things had gone too far. She said Jessica had stopped answering Emily's calls, which Megan delivered without commentary but with the faint tone of someone who found it instructive. He thanked Megan, asked her to take care of herself, and ended the call. That evening, he saw photographs from a small professional gathering posted online. Jason appeared in the background of one of them, standing at the edge of a group, not centered, not smiling. The comments underneath asked what had happened to the energy from his recent promotion. Nobody seemed to have a satisfying answer. Emily's name did not appear anywhere near the photos. She had already become a separate chapter in a story Jason was no longer telling. Later that night, he finally replied to Emily's message from days earlier, the one where she had asked only where he was. He did not answer that question. Instead, he wrote that they should begin discussing the house and their finances, the practical geography of separation. Her reply came back almost immediately. She said that was not what she had meant when she suggested a break. She said it had been a test. She said she had expected him to fight for her, to argue his way back into the room, to prove through resistance that she was worth the effort. He read her message twice. He thought about everything the word test had contained, the audience at Mark's kitchen, the expectation written across Jessica's face, the assumption that his steadiness was something she could pull on without consequence. He wrote back and asked her to meet him the following day, in a public place, in the afternoon. It took her longer to respond to that message than it had taken her to respond to the one about the house. When she finally did, she said yes. For the first time since the party, her reply did not sound confident. It sounded like someone who had been waiting for a door to open and was no longer certain which side of it she wanted to be on. He did not mark the day the divorce became final with anything particular. There was no ritual, no phone call made to announce it, no meal eaten in celebration or mourning. He simply moved forward into the next version of his days the way you move from one room to another in your own house, familiar with the walls, sure of the floor, no longer needing to look at your feet. The paperwork that had once represented everything falling apart had become, over the months, just paper, legal language, numbers, the division of a shared life into columns. He had moved into a smaller apartment on the other side of the city, a place with high ceilings and enough light in the mornings that he had started cooking breakfast again, the real kind, with time and attention, the kind of breakfast that only gets made when you have claimed your mornings back. Ryan checked in occasionally. He did not make much of it, just the kind of message that said he was around, that the world was still moving in recognizable ways. He mentioned once, briefly, that Jason had left the company under circumstances that no one at the firm was discussing publicly. He did not follow up on that. There was no satisfaction left in it, no energy to spare for the shape of someone else's consequences. The compliance tip he had sent had been nothing more than an arrangement of public information, a small redirection, and it had done what redirections do. It had changed where things flowed without requiring his continued involvement. Megan sent him a message around the time the divorce was finalized. She said Emily was doing better, which he believed, and which he was glad to hear, and which changed nothing about the decisions he had made. He wished her well and meant it. There is a particular kind of peace that does not feel peaceful in the conventional sense, not soft, not warm, not the peace of a problem resolved or a wound healed cleanly. It is more like the peace of understanding, the sense of having seen something clearly and having acted in accordance with what you saw. He had been told, in a kitchen surrounded by people who thought they were watching a man be diminished, that he was predictable. They had not meant it as a compliment. They had meant it as a verdict. But he had come to understand in the months that followed that what they had mistaken for predictability was actually something else entirely. It was consistency. It was the knowledge of what he would and would not accept, held quietly and without performance, never announced in advance but always available when tested. He had not fought for her in the way she had wanted, because fighting in that way would have required him to believe that love was something you earned repeatedly through urgency and spectacle. He did not believe that. He had believed that love was something you demonstrated through presence, through constancy, through being the same person in private that you were in public. When she had pointed at those qualities and called them weakness, he had understood that the marriage had already ended in the only way that mattered, in her estimation of who he was. What followed after that was just the world catching up to what had already been decided. He made breakfast, he read, he answered his work emails, the city outside his window moved through its ordinary business, and he moved with it, not healed exactly, not unchanged, but present and clear and entirely his own.